if I do more, if I gain more accolades, if there's my resume grows, then I'm more worthy. And as we all know, that's a recipe for burnout, but not a recipe for joy.
It's very difficult to feel joyful if you're uncertain about your belonging.
It was really my son was diagnosed with autism. That change completely transformed who I was as a mother, as a physician, and as a woman.
You're listening to Solving for Joy. I'm your host, Dr. Chrissy Ott, a multi-boarded integrative physician and professional certified life and career coach. This podcast is about joy, what it means, how we find it, and the creative ways people are solving for it in their own lives. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome, friends, to today's episode of the Solving for Joy podcast. If you are a frequent listener of the podcast, you are going to notice that I've been conspicuously absent lately. And I'll get into more of that soon on another episode. But suffice it to say that wintering has required a lot of attention and energy this year. So I am very happy to see my favorite pink tree season creeping up. I'm so delighted to bring you a conversation today with my dear friend, Dr. Yolanda Bogaert, who is a nephrologist currently living abroad in Portugal, who has 2 adult children, one of whom is autistic, and who has developed a skill for helping other professional parents, especially medical moms, who have children with a autism spectrum diagnosis. And Yolanda has many wonderful qualities and attributes and contributions to make in the world. And we are going to talk about her journey today, what it has to do with joy. And as you know from listening, my framework for joy in this conversation and context is that it's the confluence of meaning, alignment, and delight. So we are going to talk about how meaning, alignment, and delight have shown up, how it's been difficult to find them, especially in recent times, and we're going to have some fun. So Yolanda, thanks for being here. I'm so glad to have you.
Chrissy, thank you so much for having me. And I think, when I look back over my journey from kind of decades, I think that the podcast kind of Solving for Joy is a great theme for me. Going up kind of in childhood where I felt like the other and very different and kind of gone through some difficult situations with that and at home and throwing myself into becoming a healer and becoming a physician and becoming a neuroscientist as a way of validating who I am and being worthy of something. I think that's something probably a lot of your listeners can align themselves with. That sort of type A perfectionist. If I do more, if I gain more accolades, if there's my resume grows, then I'm more worthy. And as we all know, that's a recipe for burnout, but not a recipe for self-validation, self-worth, or joy. But that journey did take me into getting a joint MD PhD at the George Washington University. I picked neuroscience because I loved the how, at that kind of time, I'm dating myself, but just had sort of CAT scans of the brain, and the MRIs were just coming out. And so there was this great connection between anatomy and understanding psychiatry and so many sort of the different medications and the neural pathways. And having a lot of family members with mental illness, I thought that that was kind of really fascinating. I ended up doing a lot of work in neurobiochemistry and energy metabolism and seeing how that kind of affected the brain, and was going to be a pediatric neurologist until we were at a very tertiary care center at Children's in DC. And I realized that the cases so broke my heart that it was impossible for me to have any distance,
Mhm.
impossible for me to not kind of just be there. And so, I loved numbers. I loved the fact that it seemed like for being a nephrologist that you could kind of easily figure out what someone has, the rotation of like, I know exactly what's going on because I'm a resident. And I did that for over 20 something years, first in academics, and I left into a private practice. And along that journey, though, that going into perfectionism and everything, kind of started having a lot of neurologic symptoms myself and got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. That didn't make me stop or pause or change anything, because the adage of I could just get up earlier, I could just work harder, I could figure things out just kind of drove me through. But it was really when my son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2, and he stopped speaking and couldn't give me a hug, that
Mhm.
really stopped me in my track. And actually, that change completely transformed who I was as a mother, as a physician, and as a woman. Because what I learned from Miguel was that you couldn't mask anymore. You couldn't fake it. Like, he felt my emotions so deeply, emotions that I couldn't even feel. A lot of times as physicians, we handle things by just masking and disassociating and just pretending nothing's wrong. And,
Mhm.
I just carried all that in. And so he taught me that I couldn't do that anymore. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about kind of today, and how it helped me figure out how to solve my joy for myself and for others.
You started off talking about feeling othered and belonging and worthiness and how achievement seemed like a way to solve for that. And I know from our, off tape conversation, one of the premises we're working with today is that true joy is difficult to access if you don't feel your core needs have been met, in particular your core need for safety, both bodily and psychological safety. It's very difficult to feel joyful if you're uncertain about your belonging. And I really want to give that its moment, because I don't think that we've spent a lot of time with that concept on this podcast, but it is a real truism, and so
Mhm.
there are so many ways to
Mhm.
feel othered by our backgrounds, by our family's trauma,
Yeah.
by our intellect, whether high functioning or low functioning, and by many other traits by virtue of, being a highly intelligent woman in your lineage, with the MD, PhD.
Right.
I don't think I fully appreciate that your PhD was in neuroscience,
Mhm.
but I find that fascinating. And I want to just tell you as my friend, there was a moment where I thought I was going to do a dual fellowship in nephrology, because I too fell in love with the kidney and the numbers, and, you know,
Yeah.
that it's such a precise field. But I did not do that.
Yeah, I think actually, if you're someone that carries a lot of trauma, having certainty in whatever aspect of your life is a really reassuring thing. And as we all know, the activation energy it takes, even if you're in something that's toxic, even if you're something that's incredibly unhealthy for you, the activation energy of change is very high. And, the one thing I fell in love with nephrology versus some of these other things was that it seemed so precise. It was that it seemed so
Mhm.
black and white. And I
Yeah.
think that it was something definitely that I loved, and I still love. Um, I want to kind of lean into the fact that for me, thinking about in my life before coming onto this podcast, I thought, what does it mean to me to solve for joy? What has it meant for me to solve for joy? And, my initial thought was, okay, I'm not sure why I'm on this podcast, because I haven't haven't figured out
Because
the
I'm
other
still
side of the
figuring it
equation.
out. We're all figuring it out. Yes.
And I think I want to stop there for a second, because I think that holds such a huge key. As we look at our species as kind of, humans versus any other species on the planet, I'm not going to actually give us, besides opposable thumbs, I'm not gonna give us, like, the top lineage, right? We have a lot of intellect, but there's other species that, that undeniably are incredibly intelligent also. But I do think one thing that we have is this perception of time and legacy. And what you can see with that is that this core need of purpose, which I think a lot of clinicians really mesh into and really sacrifice a lot of other needs for, that's so prominent, right? And so, when we think about kind of what it means to solve for joy, a lot of it is that we come to an answer. And that kind of dovetails into the fact that, legacy and purpose and are we understand where we are in our time scale, or we think we do, right? We think we have this control. But truly, you know, it's really none of that. It's really living into the questions now. And I was wondering if I could read actually my very favorite poem. And this is a poem that I literally have right when I wake up, like it's right kind of there so I can
Mhm.
read into it. Because I think for so many of us type A, high achieving people, and this is something that I truly had to learn or that I was privileged to learn, and that I have so much gratitude for all the kind of quote unquote hardships in my life because it really brought into it the fact that I'm not going to get these answers, right? I'm not going to get these thoughts of these outcomes of what I wanted that I kind of hung on to that became unwittingly this cage that I ensnared myself into. That's actually not what life is about. And that's actually what not joy is about. So I'm sure you know this poem is by Rainier Maria Roque. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything, live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answers.
Mm, so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it speaks so much to embodiment
Mhm,
and integration of what we are offered along the way and not rushing it, letting time mind its
mhm.
own business, keeping ourselves out of time's business.
And that's really what my journey with my son taught me because I think because autistic kids and people that are neurodivergent can feel things so deeply. And I'm going to get a little woo here. Like, I actually think they can even feel some of the electrical energy that we all give off, right? That we know that we give off
Yes.
because that's
Uh-huh.
why we have MRIs and that's why we have EKGs. Like they really feel that to a level that we can't even appreciate. And so, when I would walk into a room and I thought I was fine, that I had taken this awful day where, I was like running into walls because like I was having a bad MS flare and I saw 30 something patients and, I had to give pretty bad prognoses to, you know, parents of, you know, teenagers. He knew and he could feel that and it would activate him. What I want to talk about is that for us to live our lives as if we're not and not to take these pauses and to not drop down and to process these emotions and to just keep kind of shoving them aside or to um, keep divulging in things that allow our brains to remain in this dopamine kind of thing. I mean, like my Netflix binging, which is, what I would do kind of coming back from a bad day.
Mhm.
Or
Totally.
having a glass of wine or just doing things that really don't allow us to process, but allow us to dissociate and to like inure ourselves against it. Also, keep us from living the questions and from dropping into joy. And for me, what Miguel taught me was that being in the present and being able to process and to hold that container for him to be a safe space because I was able to regulate myself. And it doesn't mean that you can't be sad. And it doesn't mean that you can't be angry. In fact, I would argue that after learning this, that I experience so much more of a range of emotions than I ever have.
Mhm. It makes me think of clean sadness and clean anger. Martha Beck
Yeah,
and others have this concept of clean pain, dirty pain, right? So it's like the pureness of the human experience of sadness or the pureness of
right.
anger without it being also a behavioral problematic relational problem, without it being directed necessarily at somebody, but just to be deeply with yourself and aware that you are feeling
Mm.
frustration, helplessness, sadness, grief.
Yeah, it's so huge. My daughters would sometimes have anxiety, and when we delve into it, it was that she was, this happy-go-lucky kind of person who everyone thought was just the happy girl, and so whenever she felt anger, and she feels big emotions, whenever she felt anger, she felt shame about
Yeah,
being angry. And, she would just stuff it down even further and tie it up. And, I said to her, there's nothing that makes your shame grow bigger than shaming your shame.
yeah,
If you want it to be like that Studio Ghibli, no name kind of monster just like that just gets bigger and bigger. Just shame it. And I said, there's nothing wrong with your anger. Nothing. All it's doing is telling you that there isn't something right.
yeah.
It's great. It's a great signal, right?
Mhm.
You get to decide, what, thank it, and then you get to decide and choose your response. I think there's so few times that we do that. And I think the more and more that we can do that, the more that we can say it's okay to feel these emotions to ourselves. And by doing that and being there with our kids when they're feeling those emotions, right? Just being there and being present and
Yeah,
saying, like, I get you. And for them to see, right, that we are angry and that we are sad and really expressing that and showing that, right? And that we can do that, remain human and choose our response and still act with kindness and integrity. And that's alignment. And once we do that more and more and create the sense of safety for ourselves, that
yeah,
whoever, whatever happens, however we show up, that we are enough and that we are beautiful, then the more that we create that sense of safety and space for others that we love. And I think
yes,
for the world.
yes, yes. And doing it imperfectly,
Right.
demonstrating that it's also okay to do it imperfectly. It's bringing up for me this situation that's rather current where we pulled our child out of a school and transferred her to from
Mm,
a private school to a public school in the middle of the academic year this year, largely because the private school had not handled well a chronic bullying problem, a chronic othering
mm,
problem, really impacting my child's sense of self, sense of
mhm.
social self. She was
Yeah,
learning herself as a socially undesirable entity, which was no longer
right.
something that I could allow. And then there was an episode recently that was a bit of insult to injury and demonstrating with her that we are angry on your behalf. This is
Mhm,
unjust. We feel righteous anger. When I communicate to the adults on the other side of this situation, I will do so with clarity. And there, it will be clear that I am experiencing some feelings. I will use my words, but I will not be disrespectful or dishonoring. but I
Mhm.
will express that I think this has been a travesty of justice and not healthy for the children involved.
And I think that's such a powerful thing to show your child that even when you don't have full agency over everything that happens in their lives, what you do have agency over is how you choose to honor your own emotions and to honor your response and to feel that you have had your say
Mhm.
and that you are heard.
Yes.
Because once again, that is another way of sort of claiming safety for ones that you love and to show them, to model that for them so that they can do that for themselves in difficult situations. And, all of these times that we do this and we step a little bit out of our comfort zone, because for some of us that have not had that modeling when we were younger or that modeling in society, think of our friends of color or different nationalities, of LGBTQ, like of so many layers
Mm.
of this. Once we continue to kind of work on that and to have that, then joy becomes a ripple effect.
Mhm.
I was wondering if you would do a little experiment with me, if you're up for it.
I'm game.
Remember, we're talking about safety, so I will not do anything, I promise, that will not leave you feeling safe.
I trust you.
So I want for you, we're going to just have you breathe in and out for 30 seconds, but not to stop at the top or the bottom. Okay. So I just want you to continue to cycle through. So no pause at the top at the beginning. I'm going to tell you to start. Okay. Now go faster. Breathe in and out faster. Okay. Even faster. Okay. Now stop. Now, I want you to quickly think of something that normally brings you joy. Okay. Not anything, just hold that. Okay. Now, I want you to breathe again for 30 seconds. But this time, I want you to breathe in, hold for a second, breathe out longer, hold for a second. And with each breath, just have a longer inhale and exhale, just naturally. Okay. Go ahead and start. Slow down if you can. Put your hand on your heart. Take one more deep breath in, pause, deep breath out. Okay. Now, I want you to think of that same thought, that person that, or thing that brings you joy. And tell me, what was the difference between the two?
What popped into my mind was actually a field full of tulips. We have a
Mm,
tulip festival here in Portland. It's coming up
mhm,
next month. And first, I don't know why, but tulips are what
mhm,
popped into my mind, just rows and rows, acres of
mhm,
tulips. And the first time that it popped in, it was almost like cartoonish. It was like a snapshot. It had the quality of kind of a flash. And the second time, I was definitely more in my parasympathetic nervous system. And I actually felt more like I was in the field of tulips. Like I could actually
mhm.
feel the ground and the greenery and like it was different. It had a different quality.
Yeah. So that's just taking a small little segment, right? Where we just slow down a bit. We pause and we tell our brain that it's okay to do so. And
Mhm.
when we tell our brain that it's okay to pause and to hold, we're actually priming our brain that to receive joy in a way that actually feels physically and emotionally completely different
Yes, more accessible,
and
more
deeper,
accessible.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Like where you could feel it like somatically.
much more somatically. I have a flashback. Yesterday, my child got a second set of
Mm.
earrings, ear holes pierced, something she's been looking forward to for a very long time. So today she asked me if I would wear earrings in my second piercing, which I don't normally do, but it was very sweet and I'm doing it for her. But she was very anxious to have this done, of course, as most kids are. And
Mhm.
so I gave her like a very similar direction to try to breathe from her belly and try to slow down her breath. I could see her doing it. She's not very practiced at it. Of course, she's a 12-year-old, but I could see it actually start to shift her when she was able to access that. So I really appreciate bringing attention to that because safety is good. Safety in any situation. And we actually, even if our physical bodies are at risk, we can access a form of inner safety, in my belief, that we have inner safety even when we are out of control in external circumstances, which is an important thing to bring up in today's world, in this moment in time for all of the reasons.
And likewise, the opposite is also true, right? Even if we're in a place that is safe and that
Mm,
is joyous, if we are bringing in all these other things, if we are in this reliving the sense of either big T or little t, like whatever happened today in your clinic or,
mhm.
you know, what happened on your drive home from work, whatever story that you're telling yourself also doesn't allow you to really access that sort of joy when you just walk in the door
Yeah.
of those things. And so for me, this is something that, I don't broadcast it, but it is something that I think is important to talk about because I think there's so much shame and stigma, especially for physicians. I've suffered from major depressive disorder throughout my life, and it's been a real struggle. And, having this sense of small little actions that help to kind of ground me for joy, it's been immeasurably helpful. So, like, I always carry bubbles with me. And sometimes if I'm having a really bad moment in clinic before my next patient, I'll blow bubbles. Right? Because that one little act, that one spark of which never, like, ceases to not provide me with microjoy, right? There
Delight.
is
Yes.
something for me there's something for me about seeing these bubbles go out that always makes me smile and always makes me realize that there is something about life that is beautiful, even when it's not fair and even when it's not just. There's always something that's beautiful. And one thing that I would do before coming in, walking into the door, I had this whole set of it was almost like it was in a theater room and I was like taking off my costume, my white coat, and I was putting on my mom identity. And I would physically do that. I would emotionally do that. I had sense from the home that I had for the kids. I would breathe into it. But I would pretend. I'd pretend that I hadn't seen my kids, my husband for a month.
Mm.
And that I was coming from this long trip and that I hadn't seen them for a month and how excited I was going to be to see their faces no matter what, right? No matter what I walked into. And you know, that just literally, right? I could see this huge smile on your face, Christy, right? Because just that moment.
Yeah.
And then I would walk in with that emotion because in my brain it was real. It was as if I was reliving it. And there would always be joy. And then the kids came to expect that even if mommy was like tired and everything, they knew how happy I would be to see them.
Mm.
And they would sometimes wait at the door to jump scare me, and it would be this self-fulfilling prophecy.
That is so
And
sweet and
and
so
so
mindful.
yeah, and I think the other part of creating safety is creating rituals. Like, human beings love rituals. And when
Mhm.
we have that kind of sense. And so, that's something that I think, especially for my groups of, like, high achieving moms with autistic kids, that sometimes we forget because it feels like it's like a 9 alarm fire
All
all
the
the
time.
time, all the time.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
But the pausing, right? And the ability to, like, go inside your brain and to play and to make this moment real, this imagination and this stretch, and then bringing in that micro joy really helps because it does reset your brain that this too shall pass. I'm sure you're aware of the great data when they ask parents about kids and the amount of, like, work and everything. And what it is that there's so much more. Everyone knows there's so much more time and work and energy that goes to having kids than to not having kids. But it's these small moments that we have in which it's bonded and it's there so deeply in our brains. I mean, that make life honestly worth living, that are priceless.
They're the highlight reel.
Yeah, right, and you can create that in your work. You can create that, but the first thing to create is safety. The first thing to create is a sense of space and that your emotions are fine and
Mhm.
valid and giving yourself agency and that pause. Because I loved how you said it, right? One tulip field felt cartoony, like you weren't there, and the other one, you were in that field experiencing it.
Mhm.
And, which life, Chrissy, would you rather have?
Definitely the second one. Absolutely. Yeah. Our ritual, especially when I come home from being away on a locums assignment or on other, work things that call me away, is that Issa and Sue will compete to be first hugger, and there's a whole, like, little chant that goes with
Mhm.
it. "First hugger, first hugger, first hugger," and they taunt each other with, like, who's gonna be the first hugger, and I think that that will go down in our little book of highlight reels, like, the sweetness of
Of
homecoming. It gives me joy to reflect on it
I foresee the
and
next
share
time that
that.
I see you, I'm gonna have to, like, actually take that song up, and everyone will think that we are completely, like, lunatic, but you and I will understand and we'll
We
laugh
will be delighted, and that is worth it,
for sure.
absolutely. Well, I hope this is the first of many future conversations. I think that you and I have a lot more to explore about solving for
Mm.
joy over time, whether it's in medicine or in coaching,
Mhm.
whether it's in parenting
Mhm.
or raising our voice in the world on speaking
Yeah,
stages, in authorship. I think there are so many ways to create opportunities for meaning, alignment, and delight, and then to amplify it so that it spreads and spreads this ripple.
yeah. No, thank you so much for having me and for, allowing me to participate and share my vision of kind of what I think solving for joy means for me. And I hope that everyone here listening, um, just takes a moment right now to pause and to let go of outcomes and just live into the questions now and blow
Live into
bubbles if they happen. If they don't, get some bubbles, get some bubbles.
Oh my goodness, I love bubbles so much. And I want to say with gratitude also how important and wonderful it is that you answered your own call, the call
Mm,
to mother well, and then the call to address the difficulties and special opportunities in parenting neurodivergent kids from, the perspective of a, like all of us, traumatized human with high achievement tendencies. So If anyone is looking to connect more with your work, Yolanda, where would you direct them to find you?
Yeah. Well, they can certainly find me on my website, which is just actually it's the same for Instagram or LinkedIn, Yolanda Bogaert MD. And then if you are a mom out there with an autistic kiddo, we have a Facebook community, High Achieving Moms with Autistic Kids. And I'd love for you to join because I think community is something that also creates safety and allows for the opportunity for joy.
Absolutely. Thank you for this conversation, my friend.